Johnson this year, the year being 1754, you'll remember, found an interval of leisure to make an excursion to Oxford for the purpose of consulting the libraries there. Of this and of many interesting circumstances concerning him during a part of his life when he conversed but little with the world, I am enabled to give a particular account by the liberal communications of the Reverend Mr. Thomas Warton, who obligingly furnished me with several of our common friends' letters, which he illustrated with notes. These I shall insert in their proper places. To the Reverend Mr. Thomas Warton, Sir, it is but an ill return for the book with which you were pleased to favour me, to have delayed my thanks for it till now. I am too apt to my negligence, but I can never deliberately show my disrespect to any man, disrespect to a man of your character, and I now pay you a very honest acknowledgment for the advancement of the literature of our native country. You have shown to all who shall hereafter attempt the study of our ancient authors the way to success, by directing them to the perusal of the books which those authors have read. Of this method, Hughes and men much greater than Hughes seem never to have thought. The reason why the authors which are yet read of the 16th century are so little understood is that they are read alone, and no help is borrowed from those who lived with them or before them. Some parts of this ignorance I hope to remove by my book, which now draws towards its end, but which I cannot finish to my mind without visiting the libraries at Oxford, which I, therefore, hope to see in a fortnight. I know not how long I shall stay, or where I shall lodge, but shall be sure to look for you at my arrival, and we shall easily settle the rest. I am, dear sir, your most obedient, and etc., London, July 16th, 1754, Sam Johnson. We're in the summer of 1754 now. Of his conversation while at Oxford at this time, Mr. Warton preserved and communicated to me the following memorial, which, though not written with all the care and attention which they learned and elegant writer bestowed on these compositions which he intended for the public eye, is so happily expressed in an easy style that I shall injure it by any alteration. Quoted part here. When Johnson came to Oxford in 1754, the long vacation was beginning and most people were leaving the place. This was the first time of his being there after quitting the university. The next morning after his arrival, he wished to see his old college, Pembroke. I went with him. He was highly pleased to find all the college servants which he had left there still remaining, particularly a very old butler, and expressed great satisfaction at being recognized by them and conversed with them familiarly. He waited on the master, Dr. Radcliffe, who received him very coldly. Johnson, at least, expected that the master would order a copy of his dictionary, now near publication. But the master did not choose to talk on the subject, never asked Johnson to dine, nor even to visit him, while he stayed at Oxford. After we had left the lodgings, Johnson said to me, "There lives a man who lives by the revenues of literature, and will not make a finger to support it. If I come to live at Oxford, I shall take up my abode at Trinity." We then called on the Reverend Mr. Meek, one of the fellows, and of Johnson's standing. Here was a most cordial greeting on both sides. On leaving him, Johnson said, "I used to think Meek had excellent parts when we were boys together at the college, but at last lost in a convent's solitary gloom." I remember, at the classical lecture in the hall, I could not bear Meek's superiority, and I tried to sit as far from him as I could, that I might not hear him construe. As we were leaving the college, he said, "Here I translated Pope's Messiah. Which do you think is the best line?" in it. My own favorite is Valus aromatex fundit sardonica nubis. See spicy clouds from lowly Sarin rise. That's the translation. I told him I thought it very sonorous hexameter. I did not tell him it was not in the Virgilian style. He much regretted that his first tutor was dead, for whom he seemed to retain the greatest regard. He said, I once had been a whole morning siding in Christ Church Meadow and missed his lecture in logic. After dinner he sent for me to his room. I expected a sharp rebuke for my idleness and went with a beating heart. When we were seated, he told me he had sent for me to drink a glass of wine with him and to tell me he was not angry with me for missing his lecture. This was, in fact, a most severe reprimand. Some more of the boys were then sent for, and we spent a very pleasant afternoon. Besides Mr. Meek, there was only one other fellow at Pembroke, the Reverend John Collins, now resident, from both of whom Johnson received the greatest civilities during this visit, and then pressed him very much to have a room in the college. In the course of this visit, 1754, Johnson and I walked 3 or 4 times to Elsfield, a village beautifully situated about 3 miles from Oxford, to see Mr. Wise, a Radcliffean librarian, with whom Johnson was very pleased. At this place, Mr. Wise had fitted up a house and garden, in a singular manner, but with great taste. Here was an excellent library, particularly a valuable collection of books in northern literature, with which Johnson was often very busy. One day, Mr. Wise read to us a dissertation which he had preparing for the press, entitled A History and Chronology of the Fabulous Ages. Some old divinities of Thrace, related to the Titans and called the Scabari, made a very important part of the theory of this piece, and in conversation afterwards Mr. Wise talked much of his Scabari. As we returned to Oxford in the evening, I outwalked Johnson, and he cried out, Sophomania, a Latin word which comes from his mouth with peculiar grace, and was as much as to say, Put on your drag chain. Before we got home, I again walked too fast for him, and he now cried out, Why, you walk as if you were pursued by all the cavalry in a body. In an evening, we frequently took long walks from Oxford into the country, returning to supper. Once, in our way home, we viewed the ruins of the abbeys of Osney and Rowley near Oxford. After at least half an hour's silence, Johnson said, I viewed them with indignation. We had then a long conversation on Gothic buildings, and in talking of the forms of old halls, he said, In these halls the fireplace was anciently always in the middle of the room, till the Whigs removed it on one side. About this time there had been an execution of 2 or 3 criminals at Oxford on a Monday. Soon afterwards, one day at dinner, I was saying that Mr. Swinton, the chaplain of the gaol, and also a frequent preacher before the university, a learned man, but often thoughtless and absent, preached the condemnation sermon on repentance before the convicts on the preceding day, Sunday, and that in the close he told his audience that he should give them the remainder of what he had to say on the subject the next Lord's Day. Upon which one of our company, a doctor of divinity and a plain matter-of-fact man, by way of offering an apology for Mr. Swinton, gravely remarked that he was probably preaching the same sermon before the university. Yes, sir, said Johnson, but the university were not to be hanged the next morning. I forgot to observe before that when he left Mr. Meek, as I have told above, he added, About the same time of life, Meek was left behind at Oxford to feed on a fellowship, and I went to London to get my living. Now, sir, see the difference of our literary characters. And that's the end of that. I'll be right back. I'm going to check something on the stove. All right, seems fine. So that was the memories of somebody who was with Johnson in the summer in Oxford. I forget whose name it was, though. Mr. Warden. That was also the Reverend Mr. Thomas Warden, the person he wrote that letter to. Johnson wrote that letter to earlier. And a very droll time was had by all. This is Boswell again now. The following letter was written by Dr. Johnson to Mr. Chambers of Lincoln College, afterwards Sir Robert Chambers, one of the judges in India. Communicated by the Reverend Mr. Thomas Warden, who we just were mentioning, who had the original. Oh, this is a communication. Oh, okay, so this is a letter that Thomas Warden had that was from Johnson to Sir Robert Chambers. As if you care. Who, I guess, he's got to... Hey, you need evidence to make sure it's accurate, so Boswell's doing that. It's a little boring to read, but he had to do it. To Mr. Chambers of Lincoln College, Dear Sir, the commission which I delayed to trouble you with at your departure I am now obliged to send you, and beg that you will be so kind as to carry it to Mr. Warden of Trinity, to whom I should have written immediately, but that I know not if he be yet come back to Oxford. In the catalogue of MSS of Great Britain, see Volume 1, page 18, I think MSS is manuscript, BODL, Martyrium XV, Martyrum sub Juliano, Auctore Theophylactico. It is desired that Mr. Warden will inquire and send word what will be the cost of transcribing this manuscript. Volume 2, page 32, numbers 10, 22, 58, Col Nav, I don't know what that stands for, Commentaria in Acta Apostol, comment in Septem Epistolis Catholicus. He is desired to tell what is the age of each of these manuscripts, and what it will cost to have a transcript of the 2 first pages of each. This is what they had to do before the internet. It kind of sucks. But it's, it's quaint in a way. It's nice. Mr. Warden, be not in Oxford. You may try, if you can, get it done by anybody else, or stay till he comes, according to your own convenience. It is for an Italian literato. The answer is to be directed to His Excellency Mr. Zahn, Venetian resident, Soho Square. I hope, dear sir, that you will do not regret the changes of London from Oxford. Mr. Barrett is well, and Miss Williams, and we shall all be glad to hear from you whenever you shall be so kind as to write to Sir, your most humble servant, Samuel Johnson, November 21st, 1754. And quoted part here, in a footnote. I presume she, meaning Miss Williams, was a relation of Mr. Zachariah Williams, who died in his 83rd year, July 12, 1755. When Dr. Johnson was with me at Oxford in 1755, he gave to the Bodleian Library, which I've been into, a thin quarto of 21 pages, a work in Italian, with an English translation on the opposite page. The English title page is this: An account of an attempt to ascertain the longitude at sea by an exact variation of the magnetical needle, and etc. by Zachariah Williams, London, printed for Dodsley, 1755. The English translation from the strongest internal marks is unquestionably the work of Johnson. In a blank leaf, Johnson has written the age, the time of death of the author Z. Williams, as I have said above. On another blank leaf, it's pasted a paragraph from a newspaper on the death and character of Williams, which is plainly written by Johnson. He was very anxious about placing this book in the Bodleian, and for fear of any omission or mistake, he entered in the great catalogue the title page of it in his own hand. That comes from Warden. In this statement, there is a slight mistake. The English account, which was written by Johnson, was the original. The Italian was a translation done by Baretti. I'm so glad to know that. The degree of Master of Arts, which is has been observed, could not be obtained for Johnson at an early period of his life, was now considered as an honor of considerable importance in order to grace the title pages of his dictionary. And his character in the literary world being by this time deservedly high, his friends thought that if proper exertions were made, the University of Oxford would pay him the compliment. Now I forget why he couldn't do that. I guess he didn't have enough credits or something. Or did he drop out? I don't remember now. But I do remember he tried to get it and they wouldn't give it to him. To the Reverend Mr. Thomas Wharton. That's the letter from Sam Johnson again. Dear Sir, I am extremely obliged to you and to Mr. Wise for the uncommon care which you have taken of my interest. And Wharton has a quote, the remark here, and he's referencing the procuring him the degree of Master of Arts by diploma at Oxford. If you can accomplish your kind design, I shall certainly take me a little habitation among you. The books which I promised to Mr. Wise, perhaps, and footnote here, perhaps Peter Christum. I'm sorry. Footnote here, again from Wharton. Lately Fellow of Trinity College, Mr. Wise, and at this time Radcliffean librarian at Oxford. He was a man of very considerable learning and eminently skilled in Roman and Anglo-Saxon antiquities. He died in 1767. Anyway, the books that I promised him, I have not been able to procure, but I shall send him a Finnic dictionary, the only copy, perhaps, in England, which was presented me by a learned Swede. But I keep it back that it may make a set of my own books of the new edition, with which I shall accompany it, more welcome. You will assure him of my gratitude. Poor dear Collins. Quoted. Footnote here from Wharton again. Collins, the poet, was at this time at Oxford on a visit to Mr. Wharton, but laboring under the most deplorable languor of body and objection of mind. Poor dear Collins. Would a letter give him any pleasure? I have a mind to write. I am glad of your hindrance in your Spenserian design. Footnote here again from Wharton. Of publishing a volume of observations on the rest of Spencer's works. It was hindered by my taking pupils in this college. In your Spenserian design, yet I would not have it delayed. 3 hours a day, stolen from sleep and amusement, will produce it. Let a serviteur, young student of the lowest ranks of Oxford are so called, says Wharton, let a serviteur transcribe the quotations and interleave them with the references to save time. This will shorten the work and lessen the fatigue. Can I do anything to promoting the diploma? I would not be wanting to cooperate with your kindness, of which, whatever be the effect, I shall be, dear sir, your most obliged, and etc., London, November 28, 1754, Sam Johnson. Maybe I'll read one more. One more letter. To the same. Dear Sir, I am extremely sensible of the favor done me, both by Mr. Wise and yourself. The book, his dictionary, I cannot, I think, be printed in less than 6 weeks, nor probably so soon, and I will keep back the title page for such an insertion as you seem to promise me. Be pleased to let me know what money I shall send you for bearing the expense of the affair, and I will take care that you may have it ready at your hand. I had lately the favor of a letter from your brother, with some account of poor Collins, for whom I am much concerned. I have a notion that by very great intemperance, or more properly abstinence, he may yet recover. There is an old English and Latin book of poems by Barclay called The Ship of Fools, at the end of which are a number of eclogues. So he wrote it from eclogia. Okay. Which are probably the first in our language. If you cannot find the book, I will get Mr. Dodsley to send it to you. I shall be extremely glad to hear from you again to know if the affair proceeds of the degree of Oxford. I have mentioned it to none of my friends for fear of being laughed at for my disappointment. You know, poor Mr. Dodsley has lost his wife. I believe he is much affected. I hope he will not suffer so much as I yet suffer for the loss of mine. And then something in Greek, which I will translate it as, Alas, but wherefore alas, we have suffered the lots of men. Euripides. Fragment. I have ever since seemed to myself broken off from mankind, a kind of solitary wanderer in the wild of life, without any direction or fixed point of view, a gloomy gazer on a world to which I have little relation. Yet I would endeavor, by the help of you and your brother, to supply the want of closer union by friendship, and hope to have long the pleasure of being, dear sir, most affectionately yours, London, December 21st, 1754, Sam Johnson. Whew. Well, a couple headache-inducing footnote sidetracks there. It's like pop-up video. But I thought that was nice. He sees himself as a wander in the wild of life without any direction or fixed point of view, a gloomy gazer in a world to which I have little relation. I think we can all agree, we can relate to that sometimes. Till next time, bye from Boswell.